Friese, geboren am 19.07.1929 in Waldenburg, Niederschlesien, war von 1947 bis März als Sprechstundenhilfe in meiner allgemeinen und Sanatoriumpraxis tätig. Verstehst du das alles?
Most of it.
Während dieser Zeit hatte sie Gelegenheit, alle in einer Sprechstunde anfallenden Leistungen kennenzulernen. Ihre Haupttätigkeit bestand im Empfang der Patienten, in der Assistenz in meiner Sprechstunde, in der Ausführung von Urinuntersuchungen, oh ja, die musste ich alle machen, die Urinuntersuchungen, in der Bedienung der Höhnensonne und der Sollux-Lampe und des Diensttermin- und Kurzwellenapparates. Der hatte alle möglichen Apparate und die musste ich alle lernen zu bedienen für die Patienten, sowie in der Führung der Kategorie. Neben dieser Tätigkeit hat sie auch neben der Oberschwester, das war diese Ziege, die teilweise Betreuung und Pflege von meinen Patienten, zum Teil sogar von Schwerkranken übernommen. Alle diese Aufgaben hat sie nach langer Lernzeit mit großem Fleiß, Geschick und mit viel Freude, Sorgfalt zu meiner vollen Zufriedenheit erledigt. Durch ihr jederzeit freundliches und gut und aufheiterndes Wesen und ihr korrektes Benehmen hat sie sich das Vertrauen der Patienten erworben. Nicht unerwünscht sei, dass Christel sich bei der Wiederaufrichtung unseres Hauses nach einer jahrelangen Belagerung von den Amerikanern als Reservelazarett willig und unverdrossen vor keiner Arbeit zurückgeschreckt hat. Als fleißige, flinke und treu zum Hause haltende Kraft bewährt sie sich. Wir sehen sie daher sehr ungern von uns scheiden und wünschen ihr für ihren ferneren Lebensweg alles Gute. Das ist also ein ganz ausgezeichnetes Zeugnis, das er mitgegeben hat. Hast du es verstanden?
Yeah, most of it.
Okay, good.
So, a strong letter of recommendation.
And yeah, that was very important to have, because if you had such a good letter and if you worked for and there's also the name of a Professor Schittenhelm in here, who also had patients in this sanatorium, and he was all over Germany as a very special professor known, and so to have his name on weighed very heavy and was very important.
That's
good. So yeah, that was a very good, so-called, this letter, ein Sprungbrett to jobs which were rare and which you had. So in Munich, as I said, one of the patients had a publishing house in Munich and knew me through Weinzierl, and I got then a job in Munich, badly paid, and no one had much money, and you could almost not exist. I know the end of the month, for the last 3 days, I didn't have a penny to buy food, and I very often went out hitchhiking to Tegernsee, to the Kronhaus, to be fed, or to my sister to be fed, and that is how little money we had and what a tough life it was. It really was. I have to give this guy here some food. Okay. Don't put it on. At this time, you know, I was in close contact with him, and he made it very clear to me that I represented his honor, and I represented him as a important person in Tegernsee, and I could not afford to be seen even dancing outside with a guy, and by then I was 19, and so he restricted me very much, and he made it clear his reputation, what I did also affected his reputation, so I was not allowed, even, I know one time I went in the evening out and sat on a bench with a guy who was in Tegernsee, and he asked me whether I could go in. There was a cafe nearby and we could have a dance. Somehow someone told that to Weinzierl, or someone must have seen me and told it to Weinzierl, and he made it very clear that I was seen dancing with a person, and I cannot do that in the future anymore because of his reputation. Yeah, that's how strict it was.
Rather crazy.
Nothing else went on. Did we exchange addresses? No, he was a Kurgast from somewhere and just wanted to have a nice evening and a dance and a shot, and that's all that happened.
There was something so terrible about associating with boys.
Yeah, so...
Yes, very old-fashioned thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course,
So the next job after Weinzierl was in Munich?
I was in Munich, I was this publishing
with so little money.
Place, and I got 125 Deutschmark a month and had to pay $75 rent, which left me 50 Deutschmark for a whole month for food, for clothes, for soap, for anything you needed, and I was lucky to get a place for 75 Deutschmark. That was a tiny room, no heat all winter, nothing to cook anything, no running water, no hot water, of course. There was a sink outside this little room in the hallway with cold water, and the room had nothing in it. I don't know how I survived all that, but I did survive it, and it was really tough. As I said, the last 3 days I never had a penny to buy any food or to eat. Very often I went hitchhiking to Tegernsee because I had no money to take the train, and to get some food from my sister or from my friend Grona's, their house was always open for me, and they treated me like a child, like their own child. I could go there any time I wished to or was in need, which was good to have. And of course there was the Kinderheim, the same Kinderheim. I'm still in touch with the Kinderheim where I originally started my journey in Tegernsee. The granddaughter still lives there, and we phone each other, and she still tells me, when you come visit, you can stay anytime here, anytime you wish, and that's how it has been the rest of my life, which is very good. Yeah.
It's good connection.
And then my sister had the crazy idea. She met at this Furtwängler people, she met a guy. She thought, who fell in love with her, she with him, I don't know the exact story. Anyway, he lived in New York, and she said, why don't you come to New York, and then we see what happens in New York, because in Germany you don't have much of a future, and war, and you lost everything anyway. Since we had no real home and lost everything, so we looked forward to have a better future. And so he said, but it's difficult to immigrate to the States, and it's much easier to go to Canada, first, and from Canada you can come down to the States, which is sort of the easier way. And so my sister came to me and said, look, why don't you come along? I would like to go to Canada, and we can put an application in, and there's a way. But of course we had no money to go to Canada, to pay for a trip to go just to Canada was out of question. So she said yes. She inquired the government in Canada does hire German girls for housekeepers or refugees if we qualify, and they pay us a trip over, and we have to sign a contract to work 1 year as domestic workers in a family and pay the trip back to the government, and after a year we are free in Canada to do whatever we like. And first I thought, boy, I cannot betray Germany. I'm so German, and I'm such a real German girl, and I love Germany, and how could I just betray my country and leave it for another country? And I had really a tough time dealing with that, but my sister said, no, I don't really want to go alone, and we belong together, and why don't we give it a try? Anyway, I let myself be talked into that, and we went to Karlsruhe, and we had to fill out an application, and we were interviewed by the Canadian consulate, and whether we were desirable and healthy. I think we also had to bring a certificate from a doctor, and we fulfilled all the requirements, and didn't take very long when we got the news that we were accepted to go to Canada, and they put together a whole train with girls to fly them to Montreal, and we were 2 of the chosen ones who could be on this train, but we had to let them know immediately, which and then that was quite a big decision, and of course our family to leave my mother and grandmother. Grandmother was old, and we loved grandmother more than anybody else, and that was very tough. And anyway, we decided to go because I had my job wasn't the greatest and didn't get me anywhere, and I could hardly exist there. It was another reason to try something totally new, and we decided to take this offer. We had no money to go to, we had to go to Bremen. That's where our plane was leaving from, and so we hitchhiked with our little suitcase and very little money in our pocket, first to my mother's and tante's and grandmother's place to say goodbye, and that was actually the hardest thing. I just didn't want to leave grandmother. I ran back in and back out, waiting for the bus to come to take us to the train, and ran back in as much as I could. I just didn't want to let go of grandmother, but yeah, it was very tough.
Was that the last time you ever saw her then?
Yeah, I knew that. We had no money to go back, and she wouldn't live all that long anymore. That was the last time. So we made it. We took the train up to Bremen and found the airport and the airplane, and there was a propeller airplane, still not a jet, and so it was full of German girls, about 90 German girls in this plane, who all went over the same way we did, signing up to do 1 year domestic work.
Hoping for a better life.
Yeah, for a better life. And so we were flown to, I think it was St. John's in Newfoundland first, where we went down and spent a night there. That was all part of the trip, and got in the morning a wonderful breakfast. We never had such good food. We were absolutely, I know I was just stunned what good food exists in this world, which I had never eaten. I remember one was canned peaches in a bowl, and I've never eaten ever anything so good, and we were just very impressed. And from Newfoundland, they flew us to Montreal, and in Montreal, I think we spent another night in a place which was already waiting for us to have, and next day we went to the unemployment office, all us girls, and on one side there were lots of Canadian women, and on one side were we girls, and so they picked us out somehow. I don't know, we had no choice where we wanted to go. We were just picked out there by looks, or by, I don't know what system they used, and we went into families with children and started our new life. And I was very lucky. My people, they had two little boys, and the lady was originally from Berlin, and he was from Switzerland. They were both Jewish, but they treated me very, very nicely, and they realized I had by far not warm enough clothes to survive the winter, so he, Mr. Levis was his name, he was in the clothes business. He gave me immediately a warm winter coat and some warm clothes to wear, and so I had to look after the children and do housework, which I did. And one evening a week we had to they had to let us go to English school to learn English, which was very excellent. That was paid by the government too. So we became familiar with the Canadian way of life and learning English, and we also gave, we were in contact with some other girls, and on our day off we always met and went for walks in Montreal, and we arrived there in October, I think. So that was just before the hard cold winter arrived in
what year was that?
Pardon?
What year was that?
52.
52.
Yeah. And so yeah, that was actually, we were quite happy, and everything was new to us. And say we, when we went to Safeway or Loblaws or whatever store shopping, we had never in our life heard or seen that that automatic doors existed. When we went into the store, all of a sudden the door was opening for us, and we looked up and down. We were surprised who would be so kind, and where is the person sitting opening the door for us. We hadn't the faintest idea that that was all automatically done. We thought there's a person somewhere hiding and opening doors for us. And so things like that, that was all brand new to us. And our
so much
experience.
food? Had you ever seen like so much food in a supermarket?
But mostly the food. We never in our life had eaten such good food or knew pineapples existed, and many other things, of course. And yeah, we also we were free, and on our day off we met with other girls and went out and we had a good time. Actually, that was all for us a new experience.
And of course you met George soon, right?
No, yeah, that was much later. Yeah, anyway, my sister and I, we were in constant contact, close contact.
For that first year.
Pardon?
In that first year.
In Montreal,
well,
yeah. We
I
met
guess all the time.
Every free day, all the time. And she was in a family, the lady was extremely well off and very generous and gave my sister fantastic clothes and just great stuff we could never ever afford. Even if we had the money, we could not afford clothes from Holte and through, and it fitted us all. And my sister always shared that with me, and I was just in heaven. It was beautiful. And we, of course, also where my sister was, there was another guy who worked for this family, and his name was Egon Stern, and he was from Vienna, but was so sweet and so nice. He liked us two twins very much and invited us to his family, and the first Christmas they made a real German Christmas for us with a Christmas tree and a goose, and invited us for Christmas dinner, and we were just absolutely stunned and floored about their generosity and about their caring for us after what we all had heard, what happened between the Germans and the Jews. Anyway, we made really only very, very good experiences, I have to say, that especially with the Stern family, who were most generous and took us out for outings, and Egon had a car and he drove us out to the countryside on our days off, and was just incredibly nice to us, and we stayed in touch with him until he died, unfortunately, and in touch with his family. They were really sweet.
And so you kind of felt you'd made the right choice at this point? Or how long did it take you to think you'd maybe done a good thing moving to Canada?
It was mainly my family whom I missed. And I had no money to go back, and it took me 8 years before I could go back and see my mother and aunt again. In the meantime, of course, grandmother had died, and that I regretted very, very much. I would say it's half and half. I was always with half one leg still in Germany. I love Germany and Munich and the Alps, and all my friends, which were very, very special, which I had left behind and could, especially my family, and not see for such a long time. And my mother suffered, of course, equally much. She was, there were many tears cried, and because of having Heimweh and longing to see my family. And that I do regret, and I don't think I would do it anymore. And I would either bring my family here, organize it in a different way, but not those times you can never, ever get back again. I was for a short time a chambermaid at the Sheraton Hotel.
Ah, okay.
Which I actually didn't like very much. It was a stupid job, and it was sort of just and I remember very well, not once but several times, you go from room to room, you have to clean that room, and I stood, should put some maybe soap in there. I stood by the window, and this hotel was sort of a square across the windows too. And there was a guest, very often, more than once, a male guest who pulled down his pants in the window on the other side when he saw me and started masturbating. But one time I was in the hotel room fixing the room of a guest, and the guest came in and threw me right away, came in, talked a few words, most likely, I can't remember, but then he threw me on the bed and wanted to pull down my pants and wanted to sexually abuse me. So I ran out and I recorded it to this, there was one woman who was in charge of the floor. And absolutely nothing was done. I mean, nothing was done. Yeah, that
Wow.
happened even at this time, but we had no rights, and almost you were, you know, uh, don't talk, just don't talk about it, that is happening in the hotel and so. That was the attitude.
It sure wouldn't be that way today anymore.
No, but that was
But
at
back
this
then it
time,
was still like
definitely,
that.
yeah.
Hmm.
But there were also nice
So it
kids.
shows
Anyway,
we've come a long
I think I
ways.
was only there for 2 months, and then I got another job, but that's actually unimportant
Yeah.
in the bank.
And then you met Georgie.
That was quite
At
a
some
step
point.
forward, and of course on our free spare times we always went dancing to the German club. It was a German club, and my sister and I, and one day I also went dancing, and charming, young, good-looking, good dancer asked me for a dance, and he told me why I wouldn't recognize him. I acted as if I wouldn't know him, so he had mixed me up with my sister. So he was one guy who had met my sister in a store where he sold imports, and that was just one event. And
Uh-huh.
how did we? Oh yeah, and then we always needed money. We always constantly short of money because our salary was lousy, and we got a job to work big Christmas party. The second Christmas, yeah, it was the second Christmas in Canada, '53, and it was New Year's Eve, and we went, my sister and I, we worked there till after 12, and then went with a streetcar home, and as we went into the streetcar, there were 3 German guys sitting in the streetcar, and my sister knew the one guy, that was the guy who mixed me up at the dance floor. He was also in the streetcar, and he introduced us to his friends, and one of his friends was George Schneider, and Jörg right away sort of was young and tall and charming and good looking, and so he latched on to me, and we had a conversation, and he told me that he can play the piano a bit, but hasn't got one, and loves to play the piano, and I loved very much singing, period singing, but mainly also art songs, Schubert and Mozart and that kind of songs. And so he asked whether he could come to our apartment, which I shared with my sister and some other girls, and could play the piano for me. And I said yes, and we exchanged addresses. He could do that. And surely enough, already next day someone knocked on the door, and he was George Schneider. And he came in, and so we talked and made coffee, I'm sure, and gave him food, which he happily wanted because no one looked after him. And he played the piano for me, and that went quite well. And we kind of seemed to like each other. George was lonely, he didn't have a soul in Montreal, and as good as no money, I think. Did he wash dishes at this time, where he got very, very little paid for. And anyway, he came as often as he could, and yeah, we got to know each other more and more, and the inevitable happened. He wanted very badly sex. He was young, and sex was very important, and so promptly enough, I got right away pregnant. And so
the rest
it
is
was
history, as they say.
pardon?
The rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, and of course there was no other way either. You were lucky if the guy married you, or you, I don't know what else I would have tried to get an abortion for sure. And but that wasn't possible at this time. So, and George was very willing to marry me, and so I met him on New Year's Eve, 1953, 54, and in June 19th we got married.
And there you go.
And then a little girl was born in December, Angela, our first child, and she was quite cute and sweet, but the problem was we had so little money. George had by then a job in an insurance company as a, just a filing clerk, and we could not afford an apartment on our own. We had to share it with George's brother, and sister-in-law, and they cost us lots of trouble because Angela cried a lot all the time, and they heard it and they came complaining constantly. Anyway, it was really quite a difficult time for me to keep Angela quiet all the time and to not to annoy George's sister-in-law and brother, who really wanted us out with this child if possible. And but with George's salary, it was almost impossible to rent an apartment. Anyway, then I was looking for all this extra work and extra jobs, and so I found a job in a German newspaper in Montreal, and they had their office in their house, and they were kind enough to allow me to bring my little baby into the house. They had a special room. They had a little crib left over from all their children, and I could bring Angela along and work in the office. So there was a second income, and that allowed us to get a quite reasonable apartment a bit outside of Montreal in NDG, which is Notre Dame de Grise, and so we moved out there and at least were independent. And from there on, we had built up quite a nice friend circle with German people, mainly through the dancing and through staying in contact with other girls, and so we became very much more home in Montreal and felt quite happy, and we had a nice little apartment. We were able to furnish it, and everything was quite well, and seemed to be quite well, except that after a while I couldn't have this job anymore because Angela got much bigger and needed more attention. So I took in all these foster children. One was Carol Surbeck, and other foster children from German mothers who had to go to work, but they were only able to pay $2 a day, and I had to feed them, which was really very, very little. So that was just getting by just about financially.
I see. That's how you met the Surbecks. I didn't know that in Montreal already.
Yeah, the Surbecks.
Carol.
Carol was my little, not foster child, daycare child.
Yeah.
I had her in daycare, and the Fleckeisens and a few others, and I see the little hummingbird sitting on top of the Christmas tree there. So he likes that Christmas
Yeah, he
tree.
does.
My sister was much more smarter. She had also friends and boyfriends and what was going on behind closed doors. I didn't know. We never talked about our sexual relationship with men. No, we never did. and but she also had a better job at a bank, actually, and in the evening she worked at a deli store as a sales lady and made some extra money. So she was actually financially much better off and saved some money and could even, after a few years, go back home to Germany and visit my mother and grandmother, which was very, very good. And we saw each other all the time. Every time we had a day off, or sister had a day off, she came visiting, and of course we went out together, and so all this was quite well, and we were quite happy, and sorry, still such a bad throat. And then our friend Udo, who was also George's friend, he's the one who mixed me up at the dance. He kind of liked my sister, and they did see each other more often and went out together, and then announced that they decided to get married. So that was actually, we were quite happy about that, because we liked Udo, and he was a friend of George and of George's brother, who also lived in Vancouver at this time, and we were still all in touch, and so that was a very happy announcement, and we had the wedding in our apartment, because we couldn't hire, needless to say, a hall or anything like this, and a few friends. That was lovely, and Angela, oh yeah, and by then I got pregnant again with Annette. That was after 1.5 years, Angela was born, and so then Annette, our second child, came along, and which was okay. I wanted 2 children anyway, so, but that made it financially again harder, and I had still, I did daycare to earn some extra money, and enjoyed all our friends in Montreal. And George, then all of a sudden his company needed some help for a short while in Vancouver, and the company asked him whether he would go for 4 weeks to Vancouver, to their office, and help out with some, they were short of staff. Now George was very happy to get away and go to Vancouver, and he did like Vancouver, and the people were all kind of nice to him, and so this Vancouver office offered him a permanent job and asked whether he would be willing to transfer to Vancouver. So he wrote me a letter and painted and said how beautiful Vancouver is, and he would like to have this job, and he likes the company, and he could perhaps get ahead easier than in Montreal, and he thinks we should all leave to Vancouver. And that was for me like a big lightning rod, because I didn't want to leave Montreal. I didn't want to leave all my friends we had built up, especially my sister who just got married, and I was actually very, very unhappy about the idea, and I felt I did not even get any choice or really ask or talk it over, and George just decided that's a good idea, and I guess I didn't want to stand in his way for the future either. So he came back in May, I think, and in June already we packed up whatever we could, and the company paid for the moving and for the plane tickets. We had a sleeper, and with a very, very, very heavy heart and great tears, I had to say goodbye to everything in Montreal we had built up and went to Vancouver. And when we arrived, George was given a real estate guy who was supposed to show him places where we could live. And the very, very first house the real estate guy showed him was way out in North Burnaby, and an absolute terrible place. The garden was full of blackberry weeds all over and garbage piled up in the front yard, a huge garbage pile. They must have thrown all the garbage out in the yard, and underneath the house, which of course I didn't see the house before, was a puddle, a big little lake with water. It was damp and the heating was just very dangerous actually, the whole heating system. It was a bad place. But it was also bad because we didn't have a car, and the bus station, the bus service where buses went downtown were quite far away. And I had those two little girls, I had to carry them to whenever I wanted to go shopping. Shopping was also far away. Now that's, as I said, typical George. He didn't inquire, he didn't even think of it, that it was way out, way inconvenient, no bus service close, and he didn't inspect the house. He just took the very first things they showed to me, not thinking, not calculating what is practical, what is good for the family. And anyway, when I arrived, I was very, very unhappy. Very unhappy because I didn't know a single soul in Vancouver, completely isolated in a place where you couldn't get easily to anything. The house was, everything got moldy in my cupboards, and it was just not a good house. But the thing which bothered me most, I was so homesick for Montreal, so homesick that I cried every single day. And I just thought of nothing else. How could I get back to Montreal? And I think if I would have not had the two children, I just would have hitchhiked back to Montreal. I just saw no happiness, no hope in Vancouver whatsoever. And yeah, and something I waited every day for mail from my sister and looked out the window, and something occurred. We had a hanging plan, and I was just so desperate for mail. And as I looked out the window for the mailman, I heard a sound like an electric current coming from the ceiling. It struck me all through my body, and this hanging plant went very stiff and drew through towards the window. And I was absolutely stunned and horrified. I had no idea what that was. And next day, I was standing under the light, and all of a sudden, the light started swinging back and forth very, very vividly, and I heard also the hissing sound, which kind of hit me. And actually Angela was 2.5, and she commented even, why is the light moving? So otherwise I would have thought I imagined all this, but she confirmed that the light was moving. And from this moment I was so horrified to be alone in the house. I imagined every moment someone is going to do harm to me. And I felt constantly an invisible force right next to me, who was following me everywhere I went, who was just ready to harm me, and I was totally defenseless against this force, totally. And I lived in fear all the time, and I was only happy when George was present, but he went at least twice a week at night playing bridge or chess left me alone, and I didn't want to be alone in a room because I felt I was most vulnerable being on my own. I always climbed into the bed with my 2 little children to be near some other life forms. Anyway, I went on for a couple of months, and it almost drove me crazy. And I think I developed kidney stones, kidney infections, because I was so tense and so full of fear, and I didn't know where that would end. And or then a friend from Montreal appeared in Vancouver. Fred Struve was his name, and he visited us, and he said, yeah, he's also looking for a place to stay, and would it be a good idea if he find a rental place further in town, and he would share the rent with us. And that seemed to me a very excellent idea, because I just wanted to leave this house there. And so we found a house in Vancouver on Oak Street, South Oak, which we kind of liked, and so we moved from this Burnaby place to this Oak Street house, which was much, much better. It had a bus stop right in front of our house, because we had no washing machine. I had to take all the laundry we had to a laundromat by bus with my 2 little girls. No one does this anymore, but that was all very, very hard on me to do. We couldn't afford a washing machine, we couldn't afford a television or a car, or there was no hope for me for that. Anyway, I have to say it was a tough beginning, and I wouldn't do it again. It was too hard. So I don't know whether we should stop here.
Yeah, no, we'll stop